What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another Game Informer video. Today we're going to be talking Elden Ring, a deep dive. Dan has, played as much Elden Ring, more than anybody, I think, out there as of this point. As of our exclusive coverage, Dan got an extra 10 hours of hands-on time with the game as part of, the Game Informer coverage. Of course, go over to GameInformer.com/Elden Ring and YouTube.com/Game Informer for all of our coverage. But Dan, I'm going to give the floor to you. What do you want to talk about today? Where do you want to start?
I was thinking we could just go through the cover and I could point out some stuff that hasn't been revealed yet. There will be some new information here. And along those lines, before we get going, Alex, I just want to make sure that anybody watching this video is aware that there are going to be things that could be interpreted as spoilers here. So if you want to go into the Elden Ring experience completely unbeknownst, it's time to hit that back button and and take off, because we're going to go into the cover story. I'm going to be able to elaborate on some of the bits that I couldn't fit on the written page, those 18 big pages. The original story was much, much longer.
Wow.
And again, I don't think that anything that gets revealed is going to ruin anyone's fun, or I'd never say it in the first place. But just be aware, there will be some new information here alongside going into things that you may already know or that may have already been revealed. So,
okay.
Without further ado, if you're still here, I assume that you want to hear about Elden Ring, which is coming out later this month, and I can't wait. So, cover story. Sat down, played remotely, okay? So let's begin at the beginning. A lot of people have had questions about this.
Okay.
The opening cinematics. Now, I don't honestly recall whether or not it used bits of what we've seen in other trailers, but there was absolutely a lot of new footage, either in it or it was a different entity entirely. I had to kind of get my notes going really quick here.
Sure.
So what we did see in that section, as I've stated, is sort of a more traditional, what we'd call a traditional From Software opener, where we get to see some of the major figures briefly with a sentence about them. And here are some of that were in there that I didn't reveal. Fia, the deathbed companion, was one of those characters. The loathsome dung eater. I don't think I've revealed this one yet. Sir Gideon Offnear, the all-knowing. No idea about that one. Yeah, very cool title. And here's one that I have no idea how to pronounce, and I'm going to screw it up, and that's okay. I tried to write it down as I heard it. Hora Lu, the chieftain of the Badlands, who I think we can assume is going to be one of the major characters involved in that area. Anyway, those are all sort of showcased to you very quickly in the opening reel. Traditionally, these have been stuff like, Gravelord Nito, Abyss Watchers, Aldrich the Eater, big names that are going to be doing things. Yeah. Now, obviously, we have no context for these characters or anything, so I think you're okay, but, they're just names in a reel that you're going to see the moment you boot up the game. There was another really weird critter in this reel called Gold Mask, and this was not a humanoid. It was some kind of strange creature wearing a gold mask.
Wow.
No idea how that fits in. And again, this happened very quickly, so some of this might be, you're getting it from a game of telephone here.
Sure.
But anyway, yeah, those characters were all featured heavily in that opening reel. And then we're off to the races. Traditional sort of class selection screen where we get a starting, those of you who know the Souls stuff, and this isn't a Souls, right? This is Elden Ring, not Souls. But the character select screen is similar in the fact that you're going to get a loadout of gear and stats, starting stats.
How robust does that character come? I've seen a lot of comments on YouTube asking more about that customization. Obviously, I'm sure you can tweak the basics, but how does this compare to past customization screens?
If you think that I was going to spend a minute of my 10 hours trying to get my character to look cool, that was not something I explored. I think people have already checked out the character creator. It seems to be much more robust than the previous entries, but I didn't go in there and make my character look like it. There'll be time for that. There'll be time for that on release.
All right.
But after you get your character set up and ready to go and you pick your class, you're going to get to a starting gift. And the gift that stood out to me as a point of interest was a thing called the Stone Sword Key. Everything else, looked fairly traditional stuff. Like, hey, get some more runes. I think there was a life ring in there. Very, very stuff that we've all pretty much seen as traditional starting gift items. But the Stone Sword Key intrigued me. And this was the thing that's just said, breaks through the Imp Seal. Now, almost immediately upon entering the game, we see one of these Imp Seals right at the first checkpoint. In the closed network test, this area was gated off by a shimmering door, shimmering sheen, and I could unlock it with the Stone Sword Key, and I did. There was a bunch of traps down there, and I didn't get a chance to spend a ton of time making my way past them, but I bet there was some treasure down there.
Did that seem like a one-time consumable, or that you?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
This is a one-time consumable that I have made the assumption, and I'm running with the assumption that these are going to operate extremely similar to the Pharos Lockstone from Dark Souls 2, which is essentially a consumable that leads you into secret areas. And I didn't find any more Stone Sword Keys in my playthrough, but I'm sure they're out there, right, to be found. I did find another Stone Sword Key door that I couldn't open because I had consumed my Stone Sword Key. There was a Stone Sword Key door in the castle, in Castle Stormvale, that looked like it led to a treasure on a cliff, on a parapet edge. And I couldn't get in there because I didn't have a Stone Sword Key. I'm making the assumption that these are going to be pretty interesting items that you can use to like skip past areas and or find secret treasure. So
awesome.
A little bit of assumptions there, but not too much.
Yeah.
Now we start off not in the closed network test area. We start off in a place called the Chapel of Anticipation, and this is really just a straight shot. I have no, this was. Before I continue, I want to state, this was not the final build of the game. So I was finding treasure chests all along my playthrough, and this speaks to the HUD. A lot of people had questions about the HUD, if the HUD was changed.
Yeah.
I don't know if it will be in the final build. And there were lots of placeholder items that I was picking up. There were fire longswords in like half the chests that I opened, which means, that chest was not itemized yet. Anyway, so we head on the Chapel of Anticipation, single room. We go down a trail, and at the end of that trail is the tutorial boss. Another very, From Software likes their tropes, so to speak. And this thing is pretty much supposed to kill you, and it did kill me. I bet players will kill it. There's always generally kind of like a little goodie, nothing too big that you're gonna get for beating the tutorial boss with your stick or your starting item.
Yeah.
But this grafted Scion monster, which looked very similar to a creature we saw in the closed network test, just a big bulbous mass of appendages and swords and weapons and stuff, very within the theme of Stormvale, where things are being grafted to individuals to make them stronger and more just disgusting looking.
All sorts of grafted abominations.
Yeah, lots of grafting going on over there in Stormvale Castle, and this creature was apparently from there. I, again, had the title, The Grafted Scion. Okay. So basically this thing will kill you, and then you wake up in the beginning of the closed network test area, which has a tutorial cave. I don't really want to delve into that because it's a tutorial cave. Yeah. So, which is interesting. You've got kind of the tutorial boss, and then you have a tutorial cave with its own tutorial boss, which is much easier than the Grafted Scion, and is basically just a regular soldier. Okay. No idea what that's all about, but yeah, that was the weirdest thing ever, like seeing a regular enemy with a boss health bar, essentially, at the end of that cave. And then we're out into the world, and I'm going to try to skip over stuff that was in the network test when we go over this, because, we've been there and done that, but...
Sure.
Getting out there into the world, I tried to skip a lot of areas that I'd already seen, with the exception, I did go back just to check a couple of the caves and catacombs, and we did notice that the Flask of Wondrous Physic, which we found in the network test, which is a modular buffing item, sort of a consumable that restores when you rest. So this is a very cool item that you can like put things into, essentially an alchemy flask that you can...
Like an empty alchemy flask that you can fill up with certain things?
That's exactly correct. Yeah, awesome. you can over the course of the game, you're going to have a ton of different effects you can put into this thing. But it was not in the first catacomb or cave or anything. I don't know where it was. Probably somewhere in Limgrave, but nowhere that I went in the closed network test. So that was gone, and some of the items had changed. The troll from the mines that I went into no longer dropped his sword. He dropped an appropriate troll mace, which is what I used for the used for the rest of the test. I didn't have time to test out a bunch of weapons and items because I could only afford to upgrade one weapon. Sure. Which was this giant troll club, which is probably not the best thing to do, but I know I like strength builds, so it was all right. We got through with that. Anyway, so those are
blunt. Is the mace a blunt item?
It is very blunt. It is large. Okay, this is a big club, very big. Requires lots of strength. I did find another weapon in the playthrough that required even more stats to use, and I couldn't wield it. And that we'll get into that later when I talk about Castle Morne. Which, why not? We can go there now.
Yeah, sure. We showed this footage off as part of that was our first video that we published, so people want to go and reference that for their own eyes. I'll go ahead and put the footage here while we're talking about Castle Morne, but go ahead, Dan, take it away.
So you got this. Limgrave is essentially 3 pieces, and so in broad terms, about 3 times the size of the network test, not counting Stormvale, right? So you got Eastern Limgrave, and then to the south you have the Weeping Peninsula, which is part of Limgrave. So you cross this bridge of sacrifices to get over there. There's all kinds of nasty guys on the bridge. You can avoid them. I did. You have Torrent, right? You have your mount, so you can just fly over them. I noticed that a lot of points in this game, there are going to be like a lot of soldiers and different forms of artillery and mixed bags of soldiers to try to stop you from getting across a narrow area, whether that's a bridge or a stairway or something. And Torrent really helps for that. So you can just cruise on by all of them, which is what I did. But I'm sure there probably is something interesting if you
stay and fight,
clear the bridge. Yeah. I didn't say to do that though. So moving past the bridge, there was a woman on a rock. Okay, she's just sitting there, and she's like, "Oh hey," and you're gonna see this a lot. This is like, it's sort of a take on open world questing, right? Where you're gonna get to an area and you're gonna be guided very gently nudged in the direction of something interesting. So Arena is on this, is just sitting there, and she's like, there are howls coming from this castle. I escaped, and could you deliver a letter to my father for me, for a letter to my father at Castle Morne? And I'm like, all right. Why not?
Sure, yeah.
And that leads us to the castle, which you saw in the footage. Obviously, it's guarded by a giant Titanic kind of stone soldier thing, and I saw a bunch of these in the demo, and they're kind of like the Tower Knight from Demon's Souls. You can knock them down and hit their weak point, and they probably have some good drops. They much more difficult than your standard enemy, but not a boss or a mini boss.
And were they itemized in your playthrough? In your session?
Probably, but I didn't farm them or anything.
Sure.
So I wasn't really,
Fair enough.
Again, getting into the castle, the castle was a very interesting experience for me because, as we discussed a little bit, it was not as small as a catacomb or a cave that I had delved into that you'll find in Limgrave, but it certainly wasn't as big as a legacy dungeon either. So it really spoke to the fact that they're going to have various kinds of dungeon sizes out in the overworld, instead of just being tiny legacy dungeon. There's going to be some. I'm not going to say this thing was huge or anything, but it was certainly medium size, and it had a lot of different elements in it that I could explore. Like there was lots of stuff to jump around, and there was a very traditional From Software drop down section, if you will, where you have to be, hey, I'm going to jump from this balance beam to that balance beam to that balance beam, otherwise I fall and die. They've been doing that for a bazillion games, and there was a segment in this fort that was like that. Several different kinds of enemy types. These chimera kind of things. I don't even know how to,
Yeah, like lion head, lizard tails, all that.
Yeah, lots of those, lots of different things milling about. They've taken the castle over really, and interestingly enough, they're fighting with other soldiers who are trying to keep Castle Morne going during this. So you're there in with the fight, and I saw this at several other points in the game too. Like when I took over Kenneth Heights Fort, when I took that back, he's got his own soldiers there battling the enemies as well. So there's segments where you're basically injecting yourself into the battle.
You're the observer or active participant.
Yeah, you can just let them fight, right? And you go on. And at the end of the castle, obviously, there's a really cool island with a fog gate, and that's where we fought the Leonin half-breed. Drops a freaking sweet sword. I think it required an absurd amount of strength. I couldn't even wield it with my strength. That I was, wielding a Stone Digger Trolls Club, which is a giant hammer, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't wield this thing. It was a grafted greatsword. It's in the colossal weapon class, so this is kind of their greatsword equivalent, if not in name. And this thing was sweet and had an awesome self-buff thing that just upped all your stats when used it. So that's an ash. So you could use that before you go into comments hey, I'm gonna buff myself in everything.
That's cool. Yeah.
And some poise too on top, but I didn't have the stats to wield this thing, sadly.
Sure.
And the boss was pretty traditional, so I would say he was a little bit tougher than say the troll or the chieftain, the junk that's in the caves and catacombs, the watchtower guy, the clockwork kind of dog thing. He was a little bit more challenging than that, more of a traditional humanoid From Software boss. You know, he's got lots of dashes, jumps, very quick, coming after you with a couple of different moves. But certainly not as advanced as a legacy dungeon boss or anything like that.
Okay.
But just, he was cool. He was cool. And I bet there was more stuff to do in the castle, too. And I never went back to Irina after I beat him, either. I imagine she has some interesting things to say.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. There's lots of stuff like that where you can pass time after you complete a quest and then go back and talk to people for different results. That was not all, like, finished. I finished, I did Kenneth Haight's quest chain to recover his fort while I was in the playtest, I was in this build as well, and I couldn't complete it because, he wasn't done. It wasn't completely on the game. So
I wonder if we'll see, like, when we're playing the game and you can actually complete that quest, like, if it does change, like, that part of, if that area becomes friendly or less, so, mobs don't spawn there, like.
Yeah, that already happened. So we do know that happens. Like when I completed the fort chain, Kenneth didn't like give me the final dialogue or the final whatever, but the fort was empty. No more enemies in it. So once we cleared that place out, it was done. Okay. So the fort was like a base now of sorts that we could just chill and hang out in. Cool. If we wanted to. No more enemies. So that kind of like world affecting things are going to happen. To what extent? We're not really sure, but that definitely is part of it.
Awesome.
And yeah, that's again just Limgrave. Limgrave is so much bigger than what we saw, and I spoke to this a lot already. But moving around that zone without unfettered, without those walls, just felt like a completely different experience than the closed network test, where we were corralled into a very tiny place. And I think that has a big impact on how a player feels when they experience an open world scenario. So I just want to emphasize that again. The game feels completely different when you do have that freedom. And, we could see in the east, the Badlands area, the desert, the rocky, the blood red sun and stuff. I couldn't go in there much, but I dabbled on the edge of it just to look in there. And that's the first place I'm going when I start the game, just so you know. Like that's definitely not where you're supposed. It sort of like gives you environmental cues, like maybe you shouldn't go here first. Stay in the green area.
Were there any like... did you get any context as to how you will kind of transition to that new biome? Like, yeah,
you just walk right in.
That's cool.
You just walk right in, and I did, and I got invaded. Not a player invasion, obviously, but you're still going to have NPC invasions in this game. And I was attacked by a rather hardy invader. But of course, I could have I could have hopped on torrent and said, "Forget about it, I'm leaving." But I wasn't really allowed to go into the zone to check it out anyway, so they let me like experiment on the edges of it.
Yeah.
Like my whole hands-on time, to be very clear, was viewed, and to make sure that I wasn't going to go out of bounds into any stuff that we didn't want players to see or hear about early. So, and that's completely cool, right? Yeah, it wasn't more than I didn't get to see everything. I didn't get to see everything in Limgrave, all right? And I spent a huge amount of time in there, and I bet I didn't find half of the stuff in there.
Oh.
It's so ridiculous. It's just there's stuff in every corner, And unlike other open world environments, it does breadcrumb you to the big stuff, right? Castle Morne. If you can somehow ignore a giant castle on the horizon, like you're not gonna miss that. But you are gonna miss a lot of like stuff tucked away in the corners. It's gonna really reward you for like going down on cliffs and looking over edges and peering over through things.
Oh, I'd love to hear that.
Elevator jumps and stuff like that. Just sneaking by stuff.
That's the sign of a great open world game.
Yeah.
Actually, and reward me for my exploration.
And that stuff is not like, breadcrumbed. But I think that you do get like an NPC seemed to be shooting me in to major points of interest. But there are many lesser points of interest that there's not going to be any warning for, and you're going to just stumble upon or find through your hearty curiosity. And I think that's going to be the real fun of it, is just exploring every nook and cranny of Limgrave and beyond.
Can't wait.
And that's just Castle Morne, right? That's Castle Morne and Kenneth Haight's Fort. Those were two sort of mid dungeons, although the fort didn't have a boss. Okay. And we've talked about this a little bit. The fort contained a half crescent. And later on, I discovered I could take that crescent to a door at the Divine Tower of Limgrave, okay, which is, we needed a portal to get to. Again, this was an out-of-the-way area, and I needed both halves of the Crescent Moon things to get in. And I didn't. I only found one. But I would imagine that the other half is in a place that they lead you to, right? And then I can get up to that. I don't know what's in the Divine Tower of Limgrave. It looked like it went pretty high up. And as I mentioned I think we saw in the other footage on a second Divine Tower area in Lernia of the Lakes. It looked very similar. So I don't know if that's accurate, but I'm going to make that assumption that every realm will have a Divine Tower.
That seems likely.
What's in them, no idea. But I think they're going to be in every zone, based on what I got to see of the map and what we got to see.
Awesome.
And
well, what's next?
What's next? More Limgrave. We showed off the bear the other day.
Yep.
There are multiple bears in that area. They're highly aggressive. They can demount you. They can demount you and kill you. And there's some other like berry fun activities in that area you can get into, like sneaking by a sleeping one to get down and get some extra treasure. Or I mean, I guess you could try to kill it. I don't advise that. Those things are pretty brutal. I mean, you're gonna come back to them later in the game and just chop them up, right?
Oh yeah. At the beginning, at least, they are hardy.
Yeah, Limgrave's got tons of different graveyards and tons of stuff I didn't find. So let's move on though. We've talked about Limgrave to death, and you know, there was a place I found up north, and I didn't talk about in the cover story near Stormvale Castle, and I think it was called Volcano Mansion, something along those lines. Volcano
Mansion.
Mm-hmm. And sort of, if you take Stormvale, it was kind of like to the right of it and up a little bit, so very close to the trail that I found that led to the second area, to the oceanic area. And this was a very big location that I couldn't get into, a closed door, and an NPC invader, whose name I do not recall, assaulted me pretty heavily in this area. And I don't think did I kill him? I don't think so. I think I ran away. But you could obviously there'll be an NPC invader here to take out, and what kind of activities are available inside Volcano Mansion are unknown. But it seemed kind of like an invasion-heavy area, just by the vibe I got from it. Like maybe this is something that'll be involved in PvP experiences. Not entirely sure.
No Man's Land of sorts?
Not really No Man's Land, because it's still very Limgrave aesthetic.
Oh,
but it's a very giant building.
I think I just assumed No Man's Land when you said Volcano Mansion. I just picture.
Oh yeah, it's not a volcano. It's a big building, but it's not a volcano.
Sure.
And it really didn't look like a mansion either. But you know how it goes.
Yeah.
I wanted to just call this one out because it's something I didn't talk about in the story, and it was a location we found.
Okay.
But I didn't really get inside to investigate it any further because I went to the left and I found a path up the mountainside, which took me to Zone 2, which is where Raya Lucaria Academy is, which is where.
Okay.
Ocean life, crystals, blue stuff. You've heard this all before.
Yep.
I only got to spend 30 minutes in that zone, so it was like just zoom.
Was this the foggy area? The heavy fog? Okay.
There's a layer of fog on the shallow water, and then you get to the place where it's much more submerged. So you have to jump from building top to building top because it's just all covered.
Yeah.
It's completely water, all water. There's balloons floating overhead. And I'm pretty sure I could knock him down, but I couldn't get close enough to hit him with anything like with an arrow or a spell. But there's balloons. There's freaking balloons in the air.
Like, are we talking like Breath of the Wild balloons that like you can interact with and like fly up with, or?
I mean, I don't know. I don't think we can do that. But they were like survey balloons or something. I don't know their purpose.
All right.
But they really show you the scope of the zone. You're like, wow, this is just like completely underwater. There's things floating overhead. There's magic everywhere. Like, so the zone has like, weird underwater creatures roaming everywhere, right? From giant crabs to, yes. And I know people have said this. There are giant lobsters, not just crabs. People have said in the comments that he's just calling the crab a lobster. I do know the difference between a crab and a lobster. That's what they taught me in school.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a giant lobster kind of thing. And that's a nasty opponent. Dissolving rocks in its path as it chased me into an open field full of magical goblin head type deals, and I didn't know what they were at first.
Not to interrupt you, I'm not looking forward to this zone. I have massive thalassophobia. I don't like deep water. I don't like the creatures of the deep. I can handle a lobster, but if like there's something, serpent-like in those waters,
oh come on, it's a From Software joint. There's gotta be. I don't actually think there's gonna be a bunch of serpents in this zone. I think those will probably be a better fit for like the Badlands or something. But
okay.
And to your effect, like we didn't go underwater. At no point did I go under the water.
Sure.
We're all above, but but very well displayed. And the zone aesthetic, the zone feel, the zone everything feels so much different than Limgrave. And every zone is going to have its own identity like this, which is just unbelievably impressive. You're going to be able to go when this game comes out. You're going to be able to go to a zone and like look at a screenshot and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's Limgrave. That's, you know, Lernia of the Lakes area. You know, that's the Badlands. That's Zone X.
Yeah.
You know, you'll be able to identify it on site with visual cues. They got their own creatures. They have got their own different crafting stuff. Every zone has its own identity, and it's incredible to experience. Oh. And so these goblin heads are all over the place. I'm like, what the heck are these? Like giant fishing hooks? What are these doing here? And then of course, a few minutes later, I get to see one of these goblin heads, like non-overgrown, they actually have one working outside of the gate of Lair Lucaria, like these mages. Yeah. A lot of mage types in this zone. Mages and ocean critters. That's the theme here. And these mages are pretty mean, and they power these giant war machine goblin head looking things that have cannons and fire, and
that's cool.
And you want to stay away from them.
Hydropower?
Ooh, you know, I didn't even think of that. No, I think these are more traditional mages. They use like books and spirit summoning and all kinds of weird stuff like that. Obviously, I ascended the steps of Raya Lucaria very quickly on Torrent. There's lots of enemies there. I didn't think I could get in, but it's definitely like very clearly going to be the legacy dungeon in that area. Mm-hmm. And it was locked up tight. I needed a glintstone key. No idea where to get it. I'm guessing some of the adjoining areas, like I was able to enter some of the buildings nearby, which were like studies and academies. You know, if you're familiar with other From Software games, very similar to, you know, the Duke's Archives, for instance. Books all everywhere, scholar spirits attacking you, lots of stuff to climb up on and walk around up on the high beams. We've done that in every game, right? There's always going to be those high beams that are going to have rats on them that are going to try to knock you down. Those never leave. Those are staples. Like, I bet when they start constructing the From Software game, all right, we need high beams and rats to knock people off. Those are the two things.
Swamps.
We could build out. Oh, the poison swamps are definitely coming. I didn't see any of those. I would imagine that they've got the poison swamp area will be malicious indeed. But since we do have Torrent, I would imagine that when we're in the overworld, we can somewhat negate the effects of the horrors that Miyazaki has prepared for us. With the scarlet rot and the taint of the traditional poison swamp experience. I can't wait. Man, that's a zone that I'm just gonna be like, nah, maybe later. You know? Yeah. Because that's one of the really cool things about this game, and I've stated it a ton, but people still like give me a lot of questions about this, and that's how difficult is the game compared to their past titles. And I would say this is an impossibility to put into terms, because you are going to be able to go so many different places. This isn't like a Souls game where you could like sequence break and maybe go to A, B, or C, you know, as your area choices at one of the breaking points in the game. You have the world is your oyster. And if you get to Godric, as I did, the boss of Stormvale, and he feels too challenging, which he very well may, depending on when you fight him, go to the second zone, go to the third zone, go to the fourth zone. Go anywhere. There's lots of gear to find, levels to be had, and by the time you come back, you could probably just squash Godric like a bug. So you're going to be able to sort of dial the difficulty to your liking.
Yeah.
I mean, not completely, right? Godric is still going to give you. He's gonna like raise your blood pressure a bit. I commented on this. Obviously, I was told that I was vastly underleveled while fighting him, but I do have some experience with tackling bosses like this. He just has such a huge moveset, and he hits like a truck. And he's very spry for an old guy with a lot of limbs.
Yeah, he's a massive dude. And the fact that he moves quickly is terrifying. With
an axe and a dragon head, multiple phases, and tons of different animations and stuff. That's what made it more challenging. It wasn't like
harder to read.
It wasn't like a lowly From boss. So you fight in an early game, which would be like, all right, this guy has an overhead chop, a side swipe, and a charge. Easy peasy, right? You look for the telegraphs, you go in, you poke him a couple times, rinse and repeat. Yeah. Not with Godric. Godric is all over the place. This guy's got blazing speed, huge area of effect, and very few windows of opportunity with his basic kit. So, you know, obviously, levels to taste. And and you'll be able to get some advantages before you go in there. And that's another thing I want to talk about, getting those advantages. Beyond just exploring the world and finding tons of stuff, which you will do, it seemed like I was unlocking a ton of stuff in the hub. Now, that's fairly traditional for a From Software game, but there's a lot to do in that hub. A lot more than usual, I think. Even in just my brief 10-hour stint, there were tons of characters in there. There was, I talked about this a little, just was one room in there that I thought was very strange. Nothing else in it except for something called the Twin Maiden Husks, which are, they are two ostensibly, I don't know how to put this, like corpses of twin maidens. They're husks, right? And
yeah,
you click on them and it says, give bell bearings. I never found a bell bearing. There's no indication of what giving them a bell bearing does. I have no idea what they do. I'm intrigued, obviously. What are they doing in the Roundtable Hold?
Yeah, I was going to clarify where they're at. They're at the Roundtable Hold.
They're in the Roundtable Hold, so like you've got all these other friendly NPCs being like, hey, perhaps you could find my loyal servant for me. She is lost in Limgrave. Or the Elden Ring. Well, you know, very traditional From Software stuff.
Yeah.
But I will say that there was more dialogue. They had other dialogue choices too, outside of just like, you know, talk to start their dialogue tree. You could ask them about other characters, and they would tell you about them.
That's neat. Okay. But then,
cool.
in the midst of all of that, were these two maiden husks.
Yeah.
What they want again?
A bell bearing.
Huh.
Yeah, they during that tried to get edited several times in the cover story to ball bearings, and I'm like, no, they're bell bearings. This is a real thing.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, there was a sense of like unease, even though the Roundtable Hold has like lots of golden glowies, and there's lots of people there that are on their own quests and are happy to talk with you in, you know, semi-Arthurian era dialogue, like, shall we go on a merry quest?
Yeah.
Out into the depths of Limgrave to find the beasts and stuff like that, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But there's also just like, there's a lot of locked areas in that zone that, you know, something bad is going on in there. And you know, later on in the game, you're going to open that door and there's just going to be something nasty in there.
Yeah.
And even in my experience, you know, there was a balcony I found. I talked about this in the cover. I jumped down a balcony into a big wide open arena with a bunch of bloodstains. Bloodstains mean that people have died there. Okay. So other From Software testers or players had met their end down there. But of course I was going to check it out anyway, right? So I jumped down there, and then I got immediately attacked by some wild dude called a Frenzy Tongue. And he was very similar to Gurman, the hunter from Bloodborne.
Okay.
Giant scythe, very quick. And tons of, well, Gurman doesn't have ice magic, but this guy had lots of ice magic to go with his scythe attacks. Yeah. He cut me up real good. Don't know any idea what rewards you get for beating him, but why is he there?
Yeah.
I don't know. Roundtable Hold, lots of mysteries to explore. Looking forward to recruiting everybody from outside the world to come back to hang out in the Roundtable Hold. Which is, again, a lot of people ask me questions about this. It is not on the world map. It is... The only way to get there is by teleporting. There's no, you can't like find it on the map.
So it's like your instanced hub.
Yeah, it's outside of, and I don't know if that's going to have any like if that means something. Yeah, it may not, but it takes place basically outside of the lands between.
Okay.
Oh, man, there's so much to this game. There's so much to this game. I just like, I want to go back now.
We're 30 minutes into this deep dive. Like, have we scratched the surface? Where are we at? And
we have. I'm not going to take. I don't want to spend. We already have the. You know, for people who really want to get into every nook and cranny, you can go watch that 3-hour AMA.
Sure, but you know, we talked about like a lot of things that you didn't touch on in your cover story, right? Like,
yeah, I'm glad we got
Volcano Mansion sort of thing. These secrets in the Roundtable Hold, which you covered some of those. Did you cover? I don't know if you covered the Twin Maidens or not, but
they're in there. They're in the cover story. Yeah.
Okay. But what else is there? Is there anything else that we need to kind of cover that maybe people didn't see in the cover story?
I think people have asked a lot of questions about like the templating, and this comes up a lot with From Software games. People are going to ask like how many of the assets were reused. You know, the boss of this zone is just an enemy in another zone, and you know the cave is just a cave. But I think based on what we saw, that the caves in the second area, in fact, were much different than Limgrave's sort of standard caves, right?
Yeah, we saw them mining those like purple crystals and
mining glintstone. What does this seem to be glintstone and stuff like that, and different enemy. I think we are in for such a treat with this game, and I do not like pre-release hype. I like hyping stuff out after I've gotten hands on with the full game and everything. But for this, I'm letting it go this time. I'm breaking all the rules, and I am issuing the decree that this thing is going to be the best thing ever.
All right.
It's just, and it's not something I can tell you. It's not something I can tell you in words. It's not something I can show you in video. It's something you have to experience. It's the feeling you get. It's just like everywhere you go, it's like you're not. It's not gamified, right? Sometimes you're playing an open world game and it's just like, all right, I do this thing here, I do that thing there, thing pops up, I get loot, move on. It feels like you're actually exploring an actual world here that doesn't really care that you're there.
So you're a tourist in this world.
You're there, right? And you're just experiencing what's out there. And it's, again, if you want to play it like a different From game where you're just trying to blow through the content, you're like, hey, I got to get to that next key boss. Mm-hmm. You're gonna miss out on it a lot, and I don't think people are gonna do that. Like, I don't plan to go kill Godric again right away at all. I'm going everywhere that isn't locked down first, and I'm gonna collect everything. But it doesn't feel like that gamified collection, right? Where I'm like trying to get achievements or filling out my Pokedex or anything like that. This is you're doing it so that you can explore even more and find out the mysteries of this world, of which there are many. That I'm sure have not even been covered in the most base. For all we've talked about, we have not dived into any story elements whatsoever. And I have a feeling we are in for a real treat here. The concept behind this is just completely bonkers, right? So Martin writes, some world stuff and some characters, and then Miyazaki takes them and he's just like, let's just twist them and break them down into the ghouls bosses. That's so great. Like, that is like the best possible way to do this, right? Oh my god.
I'm excited, Dan. The game comes out February 25th. Of course, we've got a lot of coverage that you can go and soak up, a lot of gameplay over on the YouTube channel that you can watch. And of course, we're going to be reviewing this game. That's our plan.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness.
I think that people probably want to stay, on Game Informer and look out for that review in the coming weeks, because we're obviously going to have a lot more than just that. So, as Elden Ring kind of gets closer and closer and we start to ramp that up, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who has watched, subscribed, liked our videos, read the cover story, subscribed to the magazine. I mean, the 18-page cover story is the drop in the bucket. Like, our magazine is filled with awesome features. So thank you everybody who has shown up the past week or two, kind of checking out all of our Elden Ring coverage. We hope that a lot of you stick around and get ready for launch. What, like 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks? It's right around the corner.
I'm just not gonna move. You don't understand. I'm oh god, I can't wait. And I know a lot of people watching are probably like, oh, this is the most like stupid hyperbole. He's exaggerating, and
that is not you though.
I've never done this.
I've been doing this. People who know our coverage know that. I mean, I think you're hard to impress. I'll just say that's my impression of, your taste in games. Like, you are intrigued by stuff that is different and new, and it seems like Elden Ring is going to bring a lot of that. So
let's go. Let's freaking go.
Let's freaking go, indeed. If you want to talk to us on social media, talk to Dan at Dan Tack. If you want to follow me, you can talk to me at It's Van Aken. Of course, GameInformer.com/Elden Ring. That's all of our coverage right there, as well as YouTube.com/GameInformer. Dan, thanks so much for joining me for this deep dive into your cover story. And everybody out there, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.